This is one that I've been wanting to do for a little while, and I didn't quite know how I wanted to start with it because it's a really complex topic and there's many different points of views and many different ways that you can look at this topic. But it's essentially about the education system as a whole, at least in the West. I'm not so certain how it is in the eastern side of the world, but in the West, North America, primarily, there's a lot of issues with it. And the issues are very specific to a variety of different topics. And so I'm going to try and go through them the best I can and what I've thought of and how they should potentially need to be changed and why they should be changed and what's wrong with them. That's really important because you need to understand exactly what we're talking about. And so the education system currently, and I'm going to separate this between high school and university because those are the two most important ones, of course. And elementary is not nearly as rudimentarily important as high school or university frontier. And so, well, what does high school look like, first of all? Well, it's something like, at least this is in Canada, and I believe it's relatively the same in the US. It's something like, no matter what you do, you can't fail high school, essentially. And if your parents complain, because parents often complain that if a child is close to not graduating from high school, of course, parents are going to start asking and wondering and potentially complaining. There's absolutely no chance the school system can't let you graduate. There's no way that they can stop you from graduating, essentially. I heard this directly from one of my teachers from high school, is that there was one kid that he had in his class that he absolutely had to give him a failing mark because the kid just wouldn't do the work, wouldn't show up to class, and expected to pass the class, which of course just absolutely makes zero sense. But because of the fact that the child's parents started, how would you say, getting in the way of the school system and of the teachers grading, the school system and the principal, of course, had to tell my teacher that you have to pass this student no matter what. And of course, then you also think about that in terms of a job or anything of the sort. You can't really even get a job just to survive in life without a high school degree. And so what would they do in that situation? And so of course the obvious answer is just make sure they pass, no matter what happens. And so that's a really big problem because not everybody deserves to pass. But what happens if they don't pass is that they can't get a job. But what happens is that some people, well, 15% of the population, it turns out, has an IQ, I believe it is less than 85 or less than 80. If you have an IQ less than 80 on average, then you aren't going to be able to work in most jobs, if not all of them, because they're just too damn complicated for the people in that bracket of IQ, and that's about 15% of the population. That means 15% of the population can't get a job. And so how do you address that? And it's not so easy to address that because what do you do when they don't know what to do? And that's exactly what essentially happens to these high school students, is that not all the time, of course, but I would say probably 25 to 50% of the time, it's these students that they just don't have the intelligence to get through high school. And of course, the parents can complain. The school system is going to have to let them get through high school and have to let them graduate. But we have no way of increasing IQ. We have no way of increasing intelligence. If there's a certain limit, and so I could have a limit of say 130 IQ, and perhaps I'm at 120 right now, and I don't actually remember what my IQ is currently. And perhaps my cap is 130, but that means I can still improve it up to that point, but that's about as far as it could go, right? And so, but if someone's cap is 80 IQ, then what do you do about that? Because that means they can't do any problem solving. They can barely do any menial tasks whatsoever. There was even one thing I heard Jordan Peterson talk about. He had a client apparently that couldn't even, he never knew how difficult it was to put a letter or fold a letter and put it into an envelope until he saw someone who couldn't do it. That's mind blowing. So someone that's within this range of IQ of about 80 or so can't do something as simple as that. To fold the paper in half or in fours, however it was folded, and put it in the envelope. Simple as that. And he could not believe that he never knew they could be so difficult until he saw someone struggling to do it. So that's a big problem that needs to be addressed, but there's no way to address it because we have no way of increasing someone's intelligence. And so that's where high school comes in. And if they can't handle the, how would you say, if they can't handle the, if they can't put forward the work that's required because they simply cannot process it, what do they do? And exactly, what do they do? Well, the school system says let them pass anyway because they need to get a job. But if they can't pass in high school, then chances are they're not going to be doing very good at the job. And so of course that's what happens most of the time, is that they can't do the job. They may have passed and went through high school, but then they can barely do the job because it's just too much for them to process. And so that's a really huge thing that needs to be addressed. And what else does the school system do separately? Well, high school, of course, in particular, it sets you up to get a job. That's its fundamental meaning. And that's for the most part what university does as well. And the thing that really, really, really bugs me is that they don't base any of it off of your personality, which is the most important part. Of course, you have conscientiousness, you have openness, you have agreeableness, your willingness to be competitive, right? That's especially important. And of course, your neuroticism and what's the other one? And extroversion. So those are all super important factors you need to take into consideration whenever you're teaching someone. You need to understand what puts them in the best possible position in order to excel properly. And it's really not obvious that the school system does this at all, and it needs to be done. Because just think about it. If you knew about a person's personality, you could put them in a position where they're going to thrive, where they're going to succeed. That's not what the school system does, of course. It does the exact opposite. It puts them in a position where they're going to have to deal with the system as it is. And so, of course, it's a system that's universal, but it's not a perfect system by any means. Well, let's look at them. May as well go into the psychology of it. So, extroversion. Well, if they're high in extroversion, then you want to put them in groups in social environments. I'm an introvert. I absolutely hated socializing for too long. I was fine with socializing, but if it was too long, number one, and with too many people, number two, then it drained me so much I couldn't even cognitively process any more information than I could for a very short period of time. And so extroverted people, highly extroverted people, you want to put them in those groups because they'll thrive more in those groups. And the introverts, you want to let them work in a group of maybe one other person, and alone would be even better. But of course some things can't be done alone. You need to learn those communication skills. Those are fundamentally important. You need to learn how to articulate yourself. You need to learn how to process your thoughts and properly manifest them for people to understand. That's why groups happen in the first place. And I didn't understand that because I absolutely hated trying to explain what I wanted to say, and it's simply because I couldn't do it. And now I'm trying to get as good as I can at it, and hopefully it's going better. And so that's extroversion. All right. Well, if they're high in conscientiousness and they're especially high in industriousness, then they want to keep working. Those are the kids that you want to give them as much work as they possibly can because they feel joy from that work. They feel a sense of fulfillment from that work. And now you could make it optional. That's probably the most important idea to take away from that, is you need to make that work optional, because you can give them the work that's mandatory, but then say, you can do more if you want to. And the industrious kids are going to love that. And that's especially something that I would love too, of course, is being able to go further beyond in order to make yourself feel productive. And that's exactly why, that's how industrious people see the world, is a potential for productivity. And if they're not doing anything at all, they just absolutely hate it and they get miserable because they want to be doing something. They want to have progress. They want to move forward. They want to have goals. And if you're low in conscientiousness, then you're essentially, all right, so I'm going to talk about the two subcategories of consciousness because I believe those are important. So conscientiousness involves intellect. No, sorry, it doesn't involve intellect. Conscientiousness involves industriousness, of course, and I don't believe I can remember the other one, but I don't believe it's as important. So people who are low in conscientiousness tend to be, of course, less industrious, therefore less wanting to do work. But they need to understand that they need to learn the discipline. So that's the important thing. If you know that they're low in conscientiousness, especially low in industriousness, you need to teach them how to become disciplined. And even industrious people fail at this. But industrious people tend to, of course, be a little bit more proactive in their work and a little bit more disciplined in what they want to do and plan out their future. And if they're low in conscientiousness and low in industriousness, you have to teach them the steps, the proper steps to study, to learn, not memorize, and I'll get into that later on. You don't want to memorize the information. You want to understand the information, be able to teach it to someone back to them. If you can teach information back to someone, you definitely understand the information properly. And after that, of course, you'd have openness. And so that people who are high in openness, now openness has two subcategories, which is aesthetics and intellect. And so aesthetics is essentially creative intelligence. So people who are artistic, of course. So if you have someone who's high in openness on the creative side, you give them the art classes, you give them the drama classes, you give them the instrument lessons, you give them exactly what they need, because that will make them thrive so much more in the other categories, because the other categories are vitally important. You need to have English, you need to have articulation skills, you need to know how to write, you need to know how to read, and so that's so incredibly important. You need to know how would you say, understand information and process it properly. And so of course those other skills are important, but if they're high in openness and high in creative intellect, you absolutely need to have that option available to them. And I believe a decent amount do, because they probably do it on their own. Piano lessons would be one of them. Taking joining a drama class at school as an optional thing, of course. And so that's wonderful. A band class as well. So many different options. So of course the options are there, which is a good thing. So they do account for that, but they don't account necessarily for the student specific about every single personality or every single personality trait that's associated with them. So instead, if they're high in openness and they're on the intellectual side, you want to make sure they have access to those philosophy classes, number one. That's the most important one. And psychology, because psychology can go so many different ways. And of course all the other sciences, they're going to be interested in those. And this, I'm not talking about the other sciences that much, because they're not really necessary or needed, because they're not necessary to be spoken about, because they're already there. And so they are an option and they're there, and some of them are mandatory. It just depends on what type of student or what type of personality trait the student has, of course. And once you know the type of personality trait that student has, then you can adapt them properly. But if you're high in openness and high in intellectual intelligence, you need to take those classes, and you will take those classes. You know those types of people. They take all the hard classes because they want to learn. They're open to experience. Now the opposite side, and now this doesn't necessarily mean that people who are high in openness don't have schedules, but people who are low in openness generally keep stronger to schedules and maintain daily routines. And these people are not as common as you may think. Now they're not super uncommon, obviously, it's a relatively good array, but I'd say, of course, it's a bell curve, right? So if you have, this is high in openness, this is low in openness, it kind of curves upwards and peaks up at the average 50%, right? And so But of course, there's still some people who are on the low and openness side, and that benefits them quite greatly because they're obviously a lot less likely to procrastinate. And procrastination, by the way, just as a little side here, procrastination doesn't have to do. It's not a problem in itself. It's not procrastination that's the problem. Procrastination is a side effect of anxiety. And so, whenever people who procrastinate about an upcoming test or an upcoming project, is because they're actually anxious about the project, and so they're putting it off as long as they can. Procrastination isn't the problem. You need to understand why you're anxious about the project. And of course, the best way to get over your fears of any sort of anxiety is to confront them properly and actually figure out just how exactly you want to manifest yourself towards them. You need to set that up in stages so that you understand properly exactly how you want to achieve each step until you get close enough to where you can face the anxiety and the fear easily. And so people who are low in openness, they love schedules, and so they're much less likely to procrastinate because they just have schedules and they just do whatever the schedule says, fundamentally. But that's exactly why they can still procrastinate, because they could choose still, if they're anxious, they could choose not to put that project or that assignment or that test onto the schedule, and then they just procrastinate anyway because they don't want to do that. But they still have a schedule, and so they'll just put it to the side, and they'll leave it for later, and they'll manifest into a bigger dragon until eventually they can't even deal with it because it's become so much, and so then they gotta really start putting a schedule on that, and then they eventually do figure it out, I believe, for the most part. And so, but sometimes, of course, they don't. But for the most part, people who are low in openness and are very good with their schedules are, of course, they're going to be good at handling that. And so, one of the important things, though, is that if you're low in openness, school is going to be somewhat of a nightmare for you. Because you're low in openness, and so you're not going to be open to experiences, you're not going to be open to new ideas, you're not going to be open to change. And so you have all these different courses you need to take. It's so much different information that you need to take in. And so, of course, the people in low openness, they're just done because it's too much information. They just want to stick to one thing and repeat it over and over. And so people who are low in openness, as you could probably expect, enjoy menial tasks and repetitive tasks where you can do the same thing over and over and achieve the same result every single time. So you don't need to change anything. It all works the exact same every single time. And so that's people who are low in openness. And that's such an important trait. Conscientiousness and openness are probably the two most important traits that need to be understood by the school system in order for them to properly have the right effect on students in order to survive and thrive in their life. And so neuroticism I can talk about a little bit, but although it's a really tough one, because neuroticism, unlike the other traits, just so you know, the other traits are like a bell curve, as I said, where at the average is 50% and meets about the middle. Neuroticism kind of goes everywhere. You could have someone on just about any spectrum, and you can't just pick someone out of the crowd and expect them to be 50%, or you can't just guess that they're about 50% neuroticism. They could be absolutely anywhere on that line. They could be super happy all the time and not experience negative emotion, or they could experience negative emotion all the time, or they can be right in the average. There's so many extremes. It's everywhere. It's really weird, and it's the only one. Every other one has a predictable method, but neuroticism, there's absolutely nothing. We have nothing to figure out why, as far as I can tell, why neuroticism is so spread out so evenly, and probably it partially has to do with the fact that it's emotions, and emotions vary so greatly that they could appear nearly anywhere on a dotted line graph, right? And so, the next personality trait I'll talk about will be agreeableness. And of course, agreeable people do not like conflict. They love relationships. They love getting along with other people, and they will always put someone else's needs first before their own. So these types of people, you can generally think of them as people who 100% certainly absolutely love to do, how would you say, volunteer work. They love to put themselves of service to others. And one of the really interesting things that I've heard about, and it makes sense, of course, if you had a trading game between a variety of different people, agreeable or disagreeable, is the most important factor in this trading game. Well, here's how an agreeable person thinks of the trading game. They see the trading game as, I'll explain the trading game actually. Imagine everyone, you have like 10 people or 100 people. Let's go with 100 people. You each give them $10, and their goal is to trade their money every single time. And in whatever various ways they want to do that, they'll trade their money. And so the agreeable people are going to do everything they can to help you. And so that's so incredibly interesting, but of course it makes perfect sense. The disagreeable people are like, no, I'm going to do the opposite. This is my game against your game, and I'm not going to help you in any way. You got to figure that out on your own. And the agreeable person thinks, no. At worst, or at best, for me, this is 50-50. And at worst, I'd like to help you as much as possible. And so that's how an agreeable person thinks. And so if you put that in the context of a high school scenario, you got to think that the agreeable person wants to get into an environment where there's no competition, where everyone can get along, and where the tasks are relatively simple. Of course, that makes sense. You don't want to be competing with others. The disagreeable people, they want to be competitive. They want to have arguments and debates, especially. So if someone who's on a debate team are definitely, without a doubt, disagreeable. And if they're competitive, of course, since they're disagreeable, they'll be on sports teams as well. They'll be on whatever, the athletes or whatever. They'll be on these teams where they want to compete with others because they want to they want to win. They see the world as a place for competition, and your goal is to compete against everybody else to get as high as you possibly can. And of course, both ways are great ways of looking at it, because think about an agreeable person, an extroverted agreeable person. They make a great team player, of course, because they want to help everyone else around them. But a disagreeable person thinks that they should be all on their own and trying to compete against everybody else. And so that actually works out really well. If you're introverted and disagreeable, that works out perfectly for you, because then you're introverted, so you don't enjoy a lot of social interaction anyways, and you're competitive, so you get to do it all on your own and figure it out all on your own. And of course you have to understand that you still need connections. You need relationships, and you need to have teams. There's always times where you need teams, no matter what. You can't do it on your own. But for an introverted person going through high school, that's just fine, because most of the time you can do everything on your own, because that's generally what they expect anyways. But if you're agreeable and you're extroverted, that also works out great if you're in a team. But if you're alone, then number one, the extroverts who are alone, they absolutely hate that. They want to work with others. They want to be social. And if they're agreeable, that's where the team play comes in. They want to help everyone else on the team. And so disagreeable or agreeable, it's not so obvious which one is the correct manner in orienting your life. But if you're agreeable, you need to watch out for not getting taken advantage of. Because of course, people who are malevolent, which is everybody, including you, including me, everybody is malevolent. And some people take advantage of the fact that they're malevolent and realize that you're agreeable, and you're going to listen to what they say because you're just so damn naive that you don't think that they're untrustworthy. Because you think you can just trust everyone. And that's a big mistake. And a lot of people don't understand that. And they go on through life getting taken advantage of over and over again, through relationships, through work, anything of the sort, because they want to help others, and if they're naive, they're going to trust everybody. So they're going to try and help everybody as much as they can, and they're going to trust everybody as much as possible. Terrible combination. You need to understand. You need to have courageous trust. You need to understand that people are malevolent, but still trust them anyways. You can't be cynical, because a cynical person will say, I can't trust anybody, and so why should I trust anybody at all? And so I'll trust nobody. And that's of course wrong. You need trust in relationships and teamwork, in work environments and anything. You need that trust, otherwise you can't have a relationship. And so that's what cynical people believe. And so yeah, essentially, that's all the personality traits. And so if the school system, the high school system, I'll talk about the university system after. If the high school system took all of those traits into account, it could be so much better for the students, because you could put them in an environment where they're going to succeed, because they're going to be happy. Because happiness, if I'm not mistaken, it makes so much sense in my head. You need happiness for success. You need it. Because if you don't have it, then what the hell are you doing? You can't do anything if you're not happy. You need to understand that you need to enjoy what you're doing, or else you're not going to have any direction in life, because you're not going to enjoy doing anything. And so that's how the high school system worked in that favor, in that manner. And not only that, but on top of that, of course, like I said, the high school system is geared towards getting people a job, which isn't too wrong, but university also does that. They also gear towards getting people a job and not really figuring out their creative potential. Because high school can do that to a certain extent, I believe, is to start someone on the path of finding out their maximum potential. But university, really, that's where you flourish and should really branch out to the maximum possibility that you can. That's one thing that a lot of people who are leaving high school don't understand. You need to get disciplined in something, you need to work on it, and you will be successful. You need to be happy about it, so you need to figure out what you enjoy. And so the high school system should be able to do that, but it doesn't. It doesn't let you figure out what you enjoy, because you have mandatory classes, you have optional classes. There's no guidance as to where you should go, because psychology, believe it or not, is not as obvious as you may think. And of course, I was completely oblivious to it until I was out of high school. And so I missed out on opportunities, of course, that I could have taken in order to manifest my personality even further, to make myself, to figure out more of what I'd be interested in. Luckily, I found programming, and that was perfect, because it's exactly what I was looking for. And so the high school system doesn't do that. They don't have a system where they can say, here's your personality, here's the psychology of it, here's where you should go, or at least try to go, and figure out and see how it goes and see what happens. You need to see what happens. So many people don't understand that. You need to try things. That's the best thing you can do. Most high school students don't know about personality theory, about psychology, obviously, because they're not even started out in life. And so they don't know where to go. And all of the high school system says, and I've heard it so many times, and it's brutal. All they say is, find a direction. What the hell does that mean? I know nothing. Of course, you're in high school. You know nothing. How the hell are you going to find a direction? Psychology helps with that greatly. High school doesn't teach it. Of course, high school doesn't teach you about money, which is so incredibly important, and that's where, off to university, of course, you still don't learn about it, because it's how the government makes money, obviously. But if the high school system taught you about money, taught you about debt, taught you about learning how to deal with debt and how to properly manage it in order to make it work for you, maybe people would turn out a little different. But that's how the government makes money. That's how banks make money, is by people not realizing they have this incredible amount of debt, this dragon that they built up over time, over much time, and then they see it, and they don't know what to do with it. They become paralyzed, and they just don't touch it, because it's huge, because they didn't learn how to deal with it. And of course, I can't see the high school system ever teaching that, but if there's any possible way that I could change that, or if anyone could change that, it needs to be done, because it could save so many people a life of chaos. And of course, as I've talked about previously, you do need chaos, but you also need order. And having a bunch of debt that's just pure chaos. There's no order there. How do you get out of debt? It's not easy. You really need to hone yourself in and work hard, really hard, to get out of that. And so that's high school. Now, university. Let's dive into that one. All right. So we need to ask, what should university do? Well, what it should do is set you up for the rest of your life. Fundamentally, it makes sense, of course. It needs to set you up for the rest of your life. But a university degree, college degree, either of them have become so incredibly overrated because so many people get to them because they all have high school diplomas now, because they're just being given out like candy. And so, but there's still potential in university, but it's got to be done correctly, and it's hard to get it done correctly because the high school system needs to be fixed first so that people can find the direction that they want. Because there's people in university who still don't know what they want, and they're still trying to figure things out, and so they just take a bunch of classes hoping they'll find something that they like. Most of the time they don't, and sometimes they do, and then after that they have this huge debt that they need to try and figure out, which is why they should save up money and figure it out beforehand on what they're going to do, or figure out their own path, because you can absolutely figure out your own path without going to university at all. But that takes a very high degree of discipline, hard work, industriousness. You need to want to work. If you don't want to work, then you're just going to be miserable. And so university is probably the best path for you, or just working a regular job for the rest of your life. Which I don't believe there's anything wrong with working a regular job for the rest of your life, because you're needed. You're needed in regular jobs. And so if you find a work environment that you're happy in, you like your coworkers, it's a good environment, it's a safe environment, it's a healthy environment, then by all means, man, like, you take it, because we need you. We need garbage men. We need people who build buildings. We need electricians. We need all of the sort. And so, by all means, you want to get a regular job, do it, because we need you. We need doctors. We need all of the sort. I guess I can't necessarily say doctors, because that would be technically you'd need to go to university or college in order to become a doctor in the first place. And so, back to university, it's supposed to give you a direction in life. It's supposed to it's supposed to, but it doesn't, and so you have to figure out your own direction in life, and that's the problem, obviously, is that there is no system that's shown to anyone at all, at any point in their life, about the way to get that direction in their life, and so they just wander aimlessly and without direction, continuously, because there was never a system shown to them. And unless if you're interested in finding out the system and asking questions like I was, then you don't know the system and you'll never know the system. So, man, university is a real killer. Because another thing that it does, and this is truly terrifying, is that even after you get a degree, you're still not guaranteed anything. Obviously, you need to put in the work after the degree just to get a job that you'll be really enjoying. And I don't want to say job, I want to say career, because it's the path you chose and it's a happy path that you chose. And so career could go even further, it could go beyond, it could be becoming an entrepreneur, which is a huge one, but it's also necessary. We also need entrepreneurs, so by all means try it, at least. I tried it, and I know I'll try again. I failed my first time, but I absolutely know I'll try again, because it was so much fun the first time. I know it's what I want to do. I just need to figure out how I'm going to do it. And so you reiterate. You go over the process again on how you did it the first time. Try it again with something different. See what happens. Learn. Read books. Experiment. Understand. So that's the path of someone who doesn't go down to university. someone who does go down university, and this is especially important to understand, is that university is pretty damn good for people who who really have no direction, but still know they want to do something. Now, if university was, as I said, geared towards helping people figure out what they want to do, maybe people wouldn't have such a chaotic mess in life. And especially the fact that university is so incredibly expensive, I don't believe that's right. Of course, that's a lot of how the government makes their money, but the education is beyond important. You don't have education, you don't have an educated society, you're not going to progress forward, obviously. And that's just something that universities, that the government doesn't either realize or doesn't want to take on the responsibility of paying for that higher education, because it's so incredibly necessary. Now, perhaps they could pay for the first year or two, and then after that, you have to continue to pay on your own because you think you want to keep going through it. But give people a chance to at least have the opportunity to try. That's what's important, and that's what they don't do. And so, what else does university do? Well, there are, of course, some professors who they have a very poor teaching etiquette. They they don't care about their students. They don't care about their futures. They try to make their class as miserable as possible. Because you can do that. And this was a wonderful story that I heard. It's about the opposite of an archetypical diner. And so an archetypical diner would be like this amazing diner that always has great food and everything. And so I'm comparing this to a university, but the opposite for a university course or a university professor's class, more specifically. So you could have that professor that you know that they're just this archetypical diner. That's everything is great. It's a great class. The teacher is really interested in teaching the students. Wonderful. Now, you can have the opposite of that too with your teacher. You could have this damn diner. You're going there in the morning. It's like 7 a.m. and the oh god, the windows look like they haven't been cleaned since like 1975 or some goddamn thing like that. And the floor is sticky. It's got that kind of thick grease of stickiness that you really have to work at for a couple years in order to really get it on there good. And so then you're walking over on this sticky floor up to the bartender, or to the person working behind the bar. So yeah, bartender. And God, they have a waitress that the guy behind the bar doesn't want to have that waitress, and that waitress just absolutely hates her job and does not want to be there, and she's extremely miserable. And so you walk up to this bartender and you tell him you ask for your damn eggs and your bacon and your potatoes and your drink, and then maybe you go over to the restroom real quick, and that's its own little slice of hell. And then you come back, and God, they give you the plate, and God, it's like you've never seen before, and this is really bad. The eggs are they're kind of burnt on underneath, and they're raw all around, and then they're kind of burnt in the center, but also raw in other places. And so you really gotta work at an egg like that in order to make it that bad. And then they give you the potatoes, and it's like they've returned to Mother Earth, because yeah, what the bartender does, or what the chef does, is he every day he puts in old potatoes with new potatoes, and keeps putting in old potatoes with new potatoes over and over in order to reuse them. And so half the potatoes have returned back to Earth because they're just so incredibly disgusting. And then of course the chef slaps them on the grill and burns some of them and keeps some of them raw, and so you have, and then he slaps them on the plate. So you got that with your damn eggs. And here's how you cook the bacon. So with the bacon, you want to get the cheap bacon that really, really smells really off, and you want to cook it. You want to, and this is how this is really important. You need to turn on the stove and have it on high heat before you put the bacon in, so that you can tap the bacon on the pan on the stove in spots so that it's burnt in some places and then raw in others, so that you can kind of choose where you want to make it burnt and where you want to make it raw. And God, and then you throw that on the plate, so you have this damn bacon. And then here's how you do the toast. And so with the toast, here's what you do. God, with the toast, you wanna throw it into the toaster, and you want to burn it completely so that it's just charred. But then you want to scrape it off a little bit so that it doesn't look too burnt, obviously. And then you want to take some margarine, not butter, first of all, some margarine, and you want to scrape that on the toast, but it's cold margarine, so it'll kind of clump up in spots, and so it won't really spread out properly, and it'll rip holes right into the toast. And so then you have this terrible toast, and you throw that on the plate. Then you get some orange juice that is only orange in color. That's a start. And then you get your coffee. And so here's what they did with the coffee is they God, I love this story so much. It's so incredibly interesting to explain. They Here's what they did with the coffee. They had the coffee beans sitting out for way too long, and so they're really mushy because of the heat. And then they throw them in there, and then into the machine, and then they pour out the coffee, and then you put whitener inside the coffee, and so then they give you the coffee, and it's like, here's your damn breakfast, and it's like, God, that's not breakfast, man. That's hell. And so that's the exact same story of some university professors and their God, and their wretched, miserable classrooms. Is that you really got to try to have a miserable diner like that. Same as you really got to try to have a miserable classroom like that. Like, you're wanting to make everyone's life worse, and some people are exactly like that. They want to make other people's lives worse to make themselves feel better, and so they just want to bring everyone down with them. God, you need to get away from that. You just need to. I don't care what kind of university you're going to. You need to get away from that if you ever experience that, because it'll just set you in a downward trajectory, because that affects you. If it's every single day, anything that's every single day affects you greatly, because that's a significant part of your life. Obviously, even 15 minutes a day for the rest of your life, that's like 1% of your entire life, 1 or 2%. And so, yeah, it's a huge deal. And so you have this class that, God, it's just a terrible, terrible classroom. You need to get out of that. And some university professors are really corrupted like that, and it has to stop, but it's not so obvious when it'll stop or how it'll stop. And God, it really ruins people's lives having a bad professor like that. And so university is not as bad as I'd say as high school, but university, they need to fix some things there as well. And so that's essentially my opinion on the education system. And it's really rough, but hopefully some sort of solution will be made at some point by somebody, because, man, it's got to change. And if it changes, it'll be for the better, for the much better future of humanity. And so this one's not as long as I thought it would go on for, but I don't really have anything else to talk about. So thank you for watching, if you even watch this, which I highly doubt. But yet again, this is for me in order to try and practice my extroverted thinking skills. I believe I'm doing a pretty good job. I barely remember saying any ums or buts or any likes or at all. So I'm very pleased with that. And so thank you for